Hi everybody, Chris here from Truly Holistic. In this video, I'm going to talk about some new information, some new wisdom that came through my soul, my consciousness, in a session that I was working with a client in regards to prevention of cancer. And this was a client who had a surgical procedure to remove cancer before, and obviously the intention of the session was for that cancer to not come back, right? So it was really interesting, the whole dynamic of the session. And not only that client learned a lot, I did as well. Now, when we look at cancer, right? Cancer is a consciousness at its core, right? It's an energy at its core. Everything is, right? Everything we perceive physically, the building blocks of what it is it's a consciousness, which we could also use the term an intelligence, right? And really, the purpose, infinite purpose of a consciousness or an intelligence, because you can't get rid of an energy, right? Energy just knows one way, and it's just to transform itself, right? It's infinite. But it wants to evolve itself, right? So when we look at cancer flourishing in a body, right, we see the mutation happening in regards to cellular development and growth in the body, right, which will see cancer cell production, but we'll also see tumors, lesions, growths occurring, which is, I'll give you a really cool analogy in a minute and based with that. But that's when cancer's thriving, okay? Because the state or environment that is provided within that body is allowing cancer to grow and evolve, right? At its core is a consciousness, right? But we then, at that point, perceive it in the physical as well, as I say, mutation of cellular growth in regards to a tumor. Now, when people, it doesn't matter what treatment option they use, right? Obviously, in modern medicine, it's either a mixture of these: surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation, right? Which is quite often called cut, burn, or poison, right? And I'm not going to go too much into that, but or going through the a more alternative or natural way is that if we get the outcome we're looking for, that person goes into remission, right? That term that we use, remission. Now, they may be in remission for a wee while, but for a lot of people, that cancer comes back, and quite often the medical establishment will refer to that cancer depending on where it comes through the body. And if it comes through the body in a different area than the first one did, they perceive it as a different cancer, but it's not, okay? And what I'm going to discuss in this video is going to explain that, right? So during that time when you're in remission, it doesn't necessarily mean cancer's gone. As I say, the core of everything that we perceive physical, including cancer, is a consciousness intelligence at its core that you cannot remove. Okay, it's infinite. Just like myself and you, as a consciousness, you're infinite, right? But what it will do is, as a consciousness, it will hide out in the body, waiting for the opportunity for the right environment to be formed in the body for it to come back out and thrive again. So we could say it's in survival mode, right? Where we don't see it on the physical level, right, as a tumor, as a mutation of cellular growth, but the intelligence or consciousness is still there. And this is what we found in the session with this particular client, is that we found that we found the intelligence or consciousness of the cancer hiding out in this person's nervous system. Now, what's really interesting about that is is that cancer feeds on fear, right? And fear is more of a mind thing, right? Our sustenance, right, that keeps us vital, well, is love, right? A state of love, and love comes from the heart. right? And for anybody that's followed my work or has watched some of the other videos I have around, we talk about this aspect of us as a consciousness, and that where we come from is through the heart. That's where we come from. That's the pathway that got us here to have an experience to begin with, was through the heart. And what we do and what we emphasize here at Truly Holistic is to get people back into their heart. For a majority of humans, their hearts are closed off. Why? Because we're called human beings, and being is a state that allows the heart to open for us to present who we are. But we're called human beings, but we're conditioned to use the mind and its thoughts as our discernment instead of the heart, which leads to us creating a state that's not our natural state, right? So we immediately utilize and use our creative process, our energy, to providing a state that then doesn't support us. But what it does support is cancer. Because cancer comes from that pathway of the mind. We don't. Okay? So when we look at the nervous system is the outreach, the extension from that pathway of mind thought. Just like the cardiovascular system is the outreach or extension of the other pathway, which is heart feel, where we come from, right? So when somebody is more heart-based, they're going to provide a state to the body, right, that cancer doesn't thrive in. It doesn't like that state because it wants that individual, that person, to be in mind thought, which then provides the state for cancer to thrive, right? And generally, anything from a consciousness or intelligence that comes through the mind, because the mind originates from a realm we call the void. And void means nothingness. So any intelligence that comes through the mind is generally, its nature is to be parasitic because it's got nothing to begin with and it needs energy for it to evolve. That's where you come in. Okay? Because the mind, starts with the void. The heart and your soul, it starts from the quantum. And quantum means everything, right? The opposite to nothing. Nothingness, right? So it wants to utilize your creative power and creative energy to forge a state, a creation, an evolvement that supports it, right? And that's how anything through the mind, that's how it goes about it. Now, so I wasn't surprised that I found it in the nervous system, but it gave me a greater understanding of, that a lot of the times that remission period where, that medical practitioner says, okay, we can't see any, we've got rid of the tumors, we can't see any mutation of the cellular growth, which we call cancer cells, you're good to go, right? You're in remission. Because modern medicine is based on the physical, right? It's a mind orientation process in itself. But we're more than that. Everything that we perceive physically is more than that. It's all built on frequency, energy, which is consciousness. So what can happen is that cancer, right, as a consciousness, it wants to grow, wants to evolve. So it hides out in the nervous system, waiting for the opportunity that something happens in your life and triggers this ability for your awareness to shift away from the heart, which is a state cancer doesn't like, to drop, to come back up into the head, into the mind and thought, to then provide a state that it's ready to come out and thrive again. And then, lo and behold, they get cancer again. Now, this is really important to note, really interesting, because now we have that awareness of that. Of course, we've always had an awareness of how cancers form. We know that, truly holistic. It's based on a state that then creates instability, an unbalanced state we call fermentation in regards to the microbial process of the body. Because cancer happens when the two factions of the body and the microbes in and on the body, when you're well and vital, they work together, right? They combine and they work together, which is really two polarities coming together to overlap, which if you see them as two circles, they overlap, they create that vesica Pisces in the middle, and that is balance. And that is actually the symbology of conception, right? Now, when we are more in the mind, though, right, because that's what happens when the heart, we bring everything together, bring balance. That's what the heart does. But when we're in the mind, it goes the opposite way, where that relationship gets broken, and each polarity goes its own way, right? So there's no balancing out between the two factions. And then the microbe is still wanting to grow and evolve because it's a consciousness at its core as well as you. And it goes about a process in trying to develop itself, to grow and evolve itself, but it's going to come to the detriment of you. And this fermentation process, if it's left unchecked in the body for long enough, it is the germination of cancer. That's what we've found, right? So, you know, and that fermentation process then enables things like inflammation, right, calcification, an imbalance in pH levels, right, where certain areas become more acidic. The balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide gets unbalanced, right? So oxygen drops, which then, because oxygen has a balancing ability to the microbes to work with the body. When that drops and carbon dioxide takes over, then all of a sudden there's a bit of chaos occur and all these other things that come about it, you know, in regards to that process. So we see unbalance in many aspects. Low-grade infections as well we see as part of that process. Now, what I'm going to get to, though, is earlier on I said we're going to use this analogy, right? So an analogy I quite often use about cancer is mushrooms, right? And I'm going to use the example of what they call a medicinal mushroom, which is a mushroom that usually grows out of the trunk of a tree. Things like reishi mushroom, shiitake, maitake, these types of mushrooms, which are generally highly medicinal, right? And they're used to enhance people's immune systems and are quite often used in regards to people that have cancer in certain areas of the world. A lot of those come out of Chinese herbal medicine. Now, so what they call that mushroom that comes out of that tree trunk, right? So it can be seen, right? Because that's its expression, it's showing itself. We call that, that's called the fruiting body. Now, that is the tumour, right? Again, we're using that analogy in regards to cancer. Now, medicine, right? A surgeon will say, okay, that's cancer. What do we need to do? We need to cut it out, right? And if then we can't see it, there's no cancer, right? But we've got to realise with that mushroom, right? That fruiting body that's coming through the trunk of the tree, it's just the top of the iceberg. It's just showing itself. It's just this expression. Just like ourselves here having a human existence, this is just the top of the iceberg. This is, we're here, our purpose to be a representation of what we really authentically are, which exists on a multitude of dimensions and realities. You know, I'm just the tip at the top. You know, that it's just not all about me. You know, there's a bigger aspect of what I am as a whole, which is often can't be seen with visible sights and the unseen. So when we come back to this analogy, right, there's the fruiting body. But what that mushroom is, what was called mycelium, is in the makeup of that tree and a multitude of those trees in that forest and in the soil. Right? And what we call a network, right? A network of communication through the soil amongst a community of trees, right? Which we can relate to what I was mentioning about before, our nervous system, right? Where I was mentioning the consciousness of cancer was still within that network, in that nervous system of that person, right? Which its consciousness is what it authentically is. The tumor, once it gets to a tumor, when it's thriving, it's just showing itself. But that's not the be-all and end-all of what cancer is, the tumor, or the mutation of the cellular growth. That's just the expression of what it is, right? And just by removing the expression doesn't mean you remove the cancer. Okay? And what I see a lot with people with cancer when they have had cancer, because you've got to realize cancer is not, as I say, just a mutated cellular growth. So cancer cells is not a tumor. Cancer is a mentality. Cancer is an intelligence, right? And when we look at, the whole process of somebody going through having cancer, it's a traumatic event. A lot of the times the treatments they get, especially when it comes to radiation, chemotherapy and surgery, it's a traumatic event, which generally puts people into fear. And as I say, fear is connected to the very pathway that cancer is facilitated to be and thrive within. Okay? And often when you then go and get into this remission state, cancer's still at the forefront of that person's focus because they don't want it back. And they're worried it might come back. Okay? So if it's becoming a forefront of your attention, your intention, underlying intention to everything that you go about your life, how you look after yourself, what I should do, what I shouldn't do, well, cancer's still controlling you. Meaning it's already developing the very state for it to come back. Right? Because it needs a certain environment and state for it to thrive in. Okay? And this is what I say because I work with a lot of people with cancer, with a lot of certain issues, and it all comes down to you because we've found out that the body, which is a form of expression in its own right, a discernment, because it communicates through symptoms, is merely an expression of your field, your state, right? The unseen. We might not be able to see it because our visible sight's so limited, right? Which is 0.0035% of the electromagnetic spectrum of light, so we hardly see anything. But we can feel the field through the body. And that's really what the body's role is. It's trying to provide an awareness to us, as long as we see it as that. But as I mentioned, our autopilot mode of discernment, right, to understand what we perceive, how to respond to it, is based by the mind and its thoughts, which is not based on feel, it's based on thought. And the body communicates through feel, so you can see the dilemma there or the conflict there, that from here we'll always misinterpret and misunderstand what the body's trying to tell us. Okay. And it's the very pathway. This is why cancer is the number two killer, right? I always say to my clients, right? Heart disease, number one killer for decades, right? If we're currently in a conventional basis of heart disease and the treatments that we're providing, if it worked, heart disease would no longer be the number one killer, but it still is. It has been for decades. That's a clue. That's a hint that what we're providing is not working. Okay. Now, it's a number one killer because, again, our autopilot mode of discernment is the mind, which has a negative and detrimental effect to the heart. Simple as that. Because where we come from is the heart. That's why it's number one killer. Number two killer is cancer, because when we're up here, what does it do to the body and the microbes? It doesn't work together. That relationship breaks apart, creating fermentation, which creates the germination for cancer to form. 1 in 4 people have a clinical diagnosis of a mental illness in their lifetime, and that's just clinically diagnosed. There'd be way more than that. And the word mental comes from the word mentality, which is a byproduct of use the mind, again, and its thoughts to discern your reality. The resolution's here, right? Because your sustenance, right? Love comes from here. It doesn't come from here. It comes from here. Right. So, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Found it really informative, insightful. If you're dealing with cancer, if you've got a friend that's dealing with cancer or any chronic issue that, you want to be treated authentically, not only get the clearing work to treat the problem, but for me to provide you the greater insight to make you more empowered, more insightful, to get into the heart, to provide a state that then supports you, doesn't work against you. And especially, it's not providing a state for cancer to flourish. Go and book a session with me at Truly Holistic, trulyholistic.net/appointments/. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and push the notification bell to be notified for the next video. Till next time, catch you later.